and here we are.
Okay, this is Wednesday, March 9th, and this is the Senate reapportionment. I'm not sure, reapportionment, redistricting, but I guess the official name is Reapportionment Committee. And we are once again looking at some maps to try and figure out where to go. Just in terms of timing, everybody, I think that the House is supposed to be set to vote out their bill. Nick, you might know better. I thought I looked at their agenda. I think they're voting it out of committee today or tomorrow.
That seems to be the working plan.
Yeah. And then, so it'll go to the House. So we should have it by, I guess, the end of next week. Is that about when we would get it if they went to the House and did second and third and then sent it? So we should hopefully be ready for it and ready to plop something on and send it back. I hope. But okay, so work has been done, I think, by different groups of people. And where are we? Does somebody I have not been really involved, partially because I thought it made sense not to, and partially because I just would have probably put Montpelier back into Caledonia County the way I was taking my pain medication. So does anybody have want to start off with any proposals or reports or new maps or anything? I see, Chris, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I think I would ask maybe Andy to walk us through one we did, but we don't have to go first if others have one.
No, I'm fine, whatever. Andy, would you like to walk us through it?
Sure, I think it would probably be best to have Nick bring it up.
Okay.
Sounds good. I've called it up and I'm going to put it on our screen share. Okay, let's get this oriented properly.
Okay.
So as usual, there's nothing really happening in the southern part of the state, or nothing different, I would say. There's
I was going to say lots happens in the southern part of the state.
Yeah.
You know, it's too bad that that the southern part of the state is so boring that we can't. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
My stuff down there. So yeah, so no changes there on this map. I had played around with Rochester, Braintree, and some of that area, but I'm convinced that this is the best that we can do for now on that little corner of the world up in the mountains. So
Nick, could we get you to, I'm sorry, Andy. Nick, could you zoom in a little bit so as Andy's orienting us?
Yeah, sorry. Which location?
Zoom in on kind of more of the Braintree area.
Yeah, the Addison orange in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are county lines that we deviated from before with different things like Pittsburgh. I toyed with Rochester and Addison County, got some pushback there. Braintree, people don't like because you can't get to Addison County from there, but population wise, it makes it for orange. And I put it into Windsor one time, but then it's only connected to Windsor by one little corner there. But anyway, that's where I ended up there. And I tried to add both and put Huntington back in Chittenden County, but you just, the numbers don't really work out that way. So
may I ask a question of Nick?
Sure, go ahead.
And that is this map available to us online so we can look at it? I'm having difficulty, frankly, reading the town titles on what's on my screen.
This map has not been distributed yet because I drew this on behalf of Senators Perchlik and Pearson. So I haven't been asked to distribute it to the committee, but I'd be happy to do so if that's what they wanted me to do.
Yeah, I agree with Randy. It's easier to look at your own screen than try to have both going. If you could email it out right now.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
It's just about like the same as our 225 map, I think.
Yeah, Senator Starr, it is very similar to that map that you, Pearson, and I had. So if you travel north a bit, Nick.
So maybe we should let's wait just a minute until
Nick is, we have no mic, so Nick is also trying to email that is my guess.
Yeah, I'll just zoom out here and
It's right there, yeah. So
little
people
slice
can
of the
look
state
at-
there, and then
That's good. We don't
you'll
need,
see the email coming around in just a quick minute.
okay.
what do you mean you have no mic? Oh, Mike Farron. I thought you meant microphone.
So
Oh.
there's no one else navigating the internet here.
Mhm.
Mike will be back in a few minutes.
Okay. And just it might be
So
okay.
this is similar to the Bobby, Chris, Andy map, let's call it. But the main thing that I was working on was trying to keep major towns in their counties. And adding Stowe to Washington County
better.
is problematic for Washington County and I think Lamoille County, in that it's a real major town for the county, economic driver and kind of central of commerce and other things for Lamoille County, and not really connected to the Montpelier-Barry sector. So you kind of have a whole new kind of focus to add to Washington County, and you're taking it away from Lamoille County. So I wanted to see, could we add it to Lamoille County, try to keep Lamoille County as much whole as we can, without also, messing with the Essex-Orleans district. So I think this is pretty close to an Essex-Orleans map that we had before. It does move Richford and Montgomery back to Franklin County.
No harm done there.
What?
Chernick, you're not muted.
Oh, that's Michael Church.
And it takes, instead of those towns, it pulls in some of the towns like Hardwick, Wolcott, Walden, down south. But then it keeps Linden in with St. Johnsbury in that Caledonia district, which goes down into Orange. It does add Orange and Elmore to Washington County, which needed a little more population.
But by doing what you did, you moved Morrisville, Stowe back north, and then you had to take Richford and Montgomery away from where they've been for years. And yeah.
Yeah, and there is different ways of doing this on the edges. I think I had a map where Montgomery was in there, but if you do both of them, then that EO district gets too high. Even with one of them, you have to move another town around. But as we've seen, you can move around the edges. You move one or two towns like the Belvedere and Waterville and Franklin County. You could move those in or out, but you got to find another town, add Alburg back in or whatever. So I was trying to kind of work on that Washington, Lamoille, Caledonia really was where I was focused on, and then EO since they're connected, obviously.
But
I believe it creates some problems that we've talked about before for Franklin County that I'm concerned about. You have things like, you have things like Belvedere and Waterville where there's just zero relationship to Franklin County and a mountain between us. There's just no relationship whatsoever with those towns that are added in. Although Richford and Montgomery are Franklin County towns, as Bobby's indicated, for the past 20 years, they've been part of that Senate district. I'm concerned about the loss of Fairfax, which is kind of integral to Franklin County. And a lot of this seems to be predicated upon just the move of Stowe. And Stowe did what we wanted to do in terms of balancing the numbers out as far as Washington County on the one hand. And there's probably more relationship between Stowe and Waterbury than there is between some of the northern towns in Lamoille County. We hear from people in Stowe that there were were obviously concerned about the potential of a move, but we've also heard from people in the northern counties who feel that there's a greater relationship between the rural areas and not a great relationship with Stowe. So, I mean, I hear mixed answers to that, but doing that correction with Stowe, there's a follow-on effect that certainly affects the Lamoille district. It affects the Franklin district. It obviously had some effect on Essex Orleans, and I'm just a bit concerned about the roll-on effect.
The deviations have gone way up too, I noticed.
Yeah, they
Franklin,
have.
7%.
The overall,
Is 12.
Yes, Franklin's a little bit over there. And I hear you, but I kind of feel the same way of moving Stowe into Washington County, and felt like kind of our goal was to keep counties together as much as we could. And if you put Stowe in, you take small towns out. So there is kind of that issue. However, Lamoille can't keep all its towns. So there are some towns that are going to be outside of Lamoille district, no matter what it is. So it's a question of, do you want a mixture of large towns and smaller towns, or try to create more of a?
Well, you take.
Wait, Bobby, Chris had a question.
well, I just an observation that sort of Senator Brock is keying on as well. I've now played with this part of the map enough to agree that basically the decision we make on Stowe is critical to everything else. And I know that sounds sort of obvious, but it's about a quarter of the Lamoille district. So, it's similar to Linden. It's a massive relative town for the whole district. And so what you're seeing here is an attempt to link it with its county and the ripple effects. And if we, rather than quarrel about the ripple effects, I think it would be useful for us to just sort of center on this decision. There, you can argue it every which way, but more than anything else, because it's smack dab in the middle of the state, or the middle of all of these districts, it's become really obvious to me that once we have a decision about Stowe one way or another, then the rest of the map, it becomes our options become much more limited. And so anyway, I just point that out. It sort of hit me obviously as we were doing this exercise yesterday.
So maybe what we need to do is we need to have some conversation about Stowe, not looking at Stowe and moving things back and forth, but just focusing on the issue of Stowe itself, and how crucial is it to keep Stowe in Lamoille County? I guess that's the question.
Is it my turn now?
It is your turn now, Bobby.
Well, if you take a big town like Stowe and move it wherever, they're going to be heard regardless. If you move them to Washington County, Stowe is big enough, wealthy enough, so they're going to be heard and going to be taken care of. You take little towns like Waterville and Belvedere and move them out of where they've been into a bigger district. They're never going to be heard of. I mean, it's just the way it is. And I think that it's bad moving those little towns off to some other county, including my own, to save Stowe to be in Lamoille County. I mean, it just doesn't add up, but I'm just one voice.
Well, you're one of 7 right now, so
Yeah,
I think that's pretty clear. Do other people have thoughts about the importance of Stowe in
it messes the whole north up.
Yeah. That-
Yeah.
Senator White.
yes.
So, I mean, I think that issue of the small towns that Senator Starr brought up is either way, like whether they're moved to a district or in the current district, they have the same issue of being small towns in a bigger district. I don't know if being in the district they were in helps them any more than moving them to a new district. Maybe in a new district, they get more attention than if they were in an old district where they're kind of forgotten about on the outskirts of either the edges of the county or away from where the senators live or away from the population centers. So I'm not convinced by that argument that it makes a difference to the small towns, whether they're in their existing district or a new district. But I think it does make a difference as far as a district having this kind of diversity of big towns and small towns. I think that is something. I don't know if that really kind of answers to the Stowe question precisely, but I think for bigger towns, it's as far as, you know, if you want to think of the character of the county and what the kind of economic drivers are, if we're going to have counties, and I know Senator White, you've made a great point in the past that counties don't really mean anything, but yet we have it in the Constitution, the state of the county lines. So in that regard, it makes more sense to me to keep Stowe in there than add this other big town to Washington County, because it's really only Washington County. We're not moving it. We've never talked about moving it over to Chittenden County. So if people want to talk about adding it to Underhill and Bolton and Jericho, I'm willing to talk about that as well.
But you can't get there from Stowe.
You can't get the Braintree to Addison County either. We did that.
Right.
Well, there's 500 people there maybe, but 5,000 is quite a lot different.
Well, maybe Stowe would be the focus on that.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes, Allison.
So as you know, I said right at the beginning, I think that Stowe is very identifiably Lamoille, and I would agree. I think when we talk about the character, I mean, there are towns that sort of are marketed as a county. I mean, if you're doing any kind of regional marketing, which we deal with in our committee quite a bit, Stowe is very definitely part and proud part of Lamoille. So for me to take out one of the key economic engines for Lamoille is really a challenge. I would agree. I think that what we tried to do with Essex is balance of big towns with smaller towns so that big towns don't have as much voice in our equity as we balance county and equity. For me, in the balance of county and equity, Stowe really should stay with its county if at all possible.
So let me ask this. We're moving towns around for senatorial districts. We're not changing counties at all. The towns are still part of the county. When Brandon was in the Addison district, which it was for, I think, 10 years.
Yep.
Did it make a huge difference to Rutland County? Did people in Brandon say, oh my God, we can't be in Addison district because we're really part of Rutland County? And when Rutland County was doing things, did it make a huge difference to that Brandon was still in their county, but not? I'm just thinking that I don't know what, I mean, we talk about the economic impact and the identification and the Stowe being the economic engine Although I see Morristown is even bigger than Stowe, but
Yeah,
maybe
no,
Stowe has.
Morrisville is too.
I'm just saying, what impact does it have on the county itself, or on the advertising, or the anything else? Does everybody in Stowe know that they're who their senator is? And do they? I guess my question is, we're creating senatorial districts, not changing counties. We're not doing that. The counties are going to remain the same as they always are, whether they make sense or not. But I guess I don't see that moving Stowe has a huge impact on the economics of Lamoille County. It's still going to be there, and it's still in Lamoille County. I don't understand.
I could jump in on that if you want, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
thank you.
So I've lived in Rutland County for 50 years and have gone through several of these district changes. And I have to agree with you, when Brandon left Rutland County District and went to the Addison County District, I don't think anybody moved because of that. I don't think they changed their shopping habits because of that, or where they worked because of that. It just became one of the situations where if you wanted some legislative help, you had somebody new to call on. And that's really all it meant. And when they came back in, the same thing happened in 2010, when Brandon went back into the Rutland district. The only thing that changed was the phone number and the person that you got a hold of if you wanted some help with state matters. People still traveled, for the most part, south if they're going to shop. I mean, it's one of those things that, from an outsider, and Senator Perchik, I'm very sensitive to, because I don't live in Lamoille or Washington counties, but as an outsider looking in, when I think of Stowe, I think of Waterbury, because Waterbury Stowe seems to go together to me much better than folks living in Eden, for instance, having a lot of affinity for people in Stowe. I think there's quite a lot of interchange between people that live in Stowe and Waterbury. So I'm of the opinion that moving Stowe is not as big a deal as some might make it out to be. But again, I'm sensitive because I don't live in either county and I don't really know. I'm just trying to relate my own experiences with Rutland County. When Brandon moved out and moved back in, I don't think anything changed for anybody except picking the phone up and getting a hold of somebody.
Okay, I wonder how you guys may have a different experience with your constituents, but when there are bigger issues, I hear from people all over the state. They don't care that they're not from my county. I hear from people all over the state about issues. And most of the people, when they want personal help of some sort, interceding with some agency or department or something, they actually more often than not go to their House members, because their House members are who they're closer to than. So anyway, that's just that may be different for different people, but their House members are going to. What district is Stowe in for the House? Is it its own? Does it have its own? That was Heidi Sherman's, right?
Yeah.
It is, Heidi, and it is one person still, I think, although Nick knows what the new House district is.
Thanks, Senator Clarkson. Yes, so the proposed plan for redistricting Stowe actually takes a chunk of the northern section along the Route 100 corridor, places that in a multi-county, I believe, 2-member district, along with Worcester, Morrisville, and I would have to check on the map what else. Anyway, so Stowe is getting divided between 2 different districts, assuming that the current proposal passes.
Thank you.
But
Anybody else want to weigh in on the Stowe issue? Andy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. I think the argument for moving any town out of any county, I agree with those sentiments that were just said by you and Senator Callamore. But that's the same with any other town you're going to take out of Lamoille County. So you can't keep all the towns in Lamoille County. So which town are you going to take out, basically, or which towns? And moving Stowe into Washington County has an impact on Lamoille County. But as far as just kind of representation, I think it is more difficult to represent kind of 3 big areas than 2. So right now, Washington District is kind of focused on the Barre Montpelier, and then kind of the Upper Valley area is a distinct place, but it's a Barre Montpelier focused district. If you add Stowe, since it's a lot of economic impact there, you can't ignore it. Kind of to Senator Starr's point, you will have to bring in, go to those Chamber of Commerce events and focus on the issues of Stowe more. And I think that is a more difficult district than if it's connected to those 4 towns that are in the county. I think in that regard, keeping it in the county makes sense than adding it to another county. That's just my reason for wanting it. And talking to the other senators from Washington County, they feel the same way.
And that's because it would make it makes it easier for the senators from Washington County.
Yeah, which I think makes it better for the residents of that district.
But this is supposed to be for the citizens of the state and not for our convenience. I mean, take a look at my district and see how far it is from Troy down to Waterford. Well, hey, I've had to do that for 20 odd years, and so be it. But I still think those smaller towns on the northern end of Lamoille County having to go in with Franklin is not right. And it wouldn't be right to move them in with us either over in Orleans County. They should be with their own county, and there are 3 of you down there, Andy, representing that area.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I'm not saying it because it's difficult.
What the fuck are you saying?
in all fairness, Bobby, I don't think we're talking.
Jeannie, we need you to mute. Jeannie Albert, please mute.
Oh, I couldn't see who it was.
Can I just add something also? I'm sorry, Allison, were you speaking?
No, I was just going to say, I don't think it's fair to say it's about convenience. It's about service. And I think Andy's point was about how to serve your constituents.
Okay. Okay, Chris.
I agree to a great extent with some of the things Bobby has said, because in order to accommodate Stowe in the way that's being planned, the smaller towns, such as Belvedere and Waterville, that wind up going to Franklin, such as Walcott, which goes to Orleans, Elmore, which goes to Washington. Those are the smaller towns, and they get carved up. And those are the towns that have a much greater affiliation one with each other, because they're small rural towns that don't have a voice, and they'll have much less of a voice as far as the rural parts and the majority of the towns in Lamoille County, if they're carved up in this fashion. And that's what has to happen if Stowe has to come in. Now you take the subtotal of those little towns and they actually exceed the population of Stowe. So if we're looking at properly serving Lamoille County as well as dealing with the demographics that we have to, that move of Stowe to Washington, which also balances the numbers in Washington, which are off as a result of that absence, it just makes much more sense, and there's less carving up of Lamoille County as a result. To keep Stowe in, what we've got to do is treat the rest of Lamoille County as sacrificial lamb and carve it up.
Chris?
So no matter how you slice it, we're moving about 5,000 people in or out. So whether they're divided across towns or in one big town, I'm not sure it's a huge distinction. But to Senator Starr's point, this is about the voters and citizens of our state. But we're also in a process where we have to ask current senators to vote for this. So, for instance, I would myself, if I were drawing a map, would draw a map very different than this, and I would certainly split up EO into two single seat districts if it were me. But I've heard very plainly from the senators in that area that they would rather one big 2-seat district. I also am hearing very plainly from the Washington County senators that they would rather not have a third significant center that is not in their county. And I don't have strong feelings about that. But the fact of the matter is we are in a process, flawed though it is, that sort of has the sitting people making these decisions. And so I think where I come from, not feeling strongly personally, I think that we're going to do better by basically, hearing what the local people are saying and following that. And we can all, the challenge that I see in this process is you can justify in different ways just about any map, because the criteria is there's numerous criteria that you're allowed to use to satisfy. And so one of them to me is getting a strong vote, one that has compromise that is across party lines would be my goal. And I think we're going to best do that if we are, taking the local point of view from the folks that are going to do the vote. And so in that sense, I'm prepared to listen to Senator Cummings, Perchlik, and Polina. And anyway, so I just thought I'd offer that.
Well, I think you should also listen to Senator Weston,
Right.
who represents Lamoille.
What, does anybody know where his thoughts on this? I haven't heard anything from him except when I suggested moving Cambridge. He didn't like that very much, but I didn't know that.
I've heard from him several times.
Where is he?
He wants to keep those small towns up north, and if somebody has to go, it should be down the southern part of the county.
And that's what he's told me as well.
Okay, so the decision is Stowe stays in Lamoille, or Stowe moves to Washington, and Belvedere, Waterville, Walcott, and Elmore go back to Lamoille, which is where they are. They're currently in that county, right?
Yeah.
Well, some of them are in EO. Wolcott is in EO right now.
No. I meant in the county itself.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah.
They're part of Lamoille.
Yeah, they're part of Lamoille, and that's the kind of the 5,000 one. And
Yeah.
is that
That's the 5,000 trade. That's the trade.
Yeah, I think that totals about 6,500 in all, if you count each one of them. So there may be one town that goes someplace else if we need it for balance, but it's pretty close.
Andy, is that a new hand?
No, that's the old hand. I don't think those 4 towns equal over 5,000 people. The Belvedere and Waterville are barely 1,000, and then Elmore's 800, Walcott's 1,600.
Yeah, remember we did it with Hardwick, another map.
Yes, Hardwick.
Yeah, we did with Hardwick. That's right. We did.
Well, Hardwick should be there.
Hardwick should be where, Bobby?
Over in Lamoille County. I mean, Hardwick has a lot to do with Lamoille County. Car dealerships and the whole 9 yards. Wolcott and Hardwick and Morrisville all run together. They travel back and forth. If it can't be in Caledonia County, it should be over in Lamoille County.
Well,
Route 15 runs right through there.
You can move Hardwick back to Caledonia, but then you have to get Linden back to EO.
And
No,
that puts,
we-
puts,
You
Yeah.
don't have to do that. We had our map all figured out until it got tinkered up with. The northern,
well,
Except
Madam Chair,
Yes, Allison?
perhaps while we're at this impasse at this moment, we might take a look at some of the thoughts that we worked on with Chittenden County. I mean, just to sort of shake us up, because we seem to be I mean, I know we need to make the decision about Stowe because it does impact everything else. It doesn't particularly impact some of the ideas that we worked on in Chittenden.
One of the
Okay,
things
yeah.
I've heard from Chittenden, if we want to go there, is, an earlier map had a Chittenden district in which Essex was its own single-member district, and then those remaining smaller towns represented a second single-member district. There's concern. I know I've talked with people from Milton and Fairfax, and again, I hate to lose Fairfax, but I've talked to people there who say in the event that there is a move, they are concerned about being lumped in with Essex, which is a location that is almost a Chittenden County urban area, as opposed to these largely rural areas that get combined with them. And again, this concern about being overwhelmed and the desire that it would be much better if Essex were its own district and these smaller towns were a separate single-member district.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the rationale is for putting Essex in with them, if it can stand on its own.
Oh,
I'd like to jump in.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a tree farm in Essex. There's plenty of rural parts of Essex. Part of the internal, politics there over recent years has been the village and the sort of more urban core versus the rest. I'll just walk you through here, Nick, if you'd zoom in. As promised, I said I would try a map that didn't have Burlington as a 2-seat district, but played around with splitting it up. This does that. It's hard to tell where the municipal lines are, though they're faint there. But basically, this is the old north, most of the old north end and the new north end of Burlington. Winooski, I'm looking at this gray one now, or sort of taupe. Winooski and part of South Burlington. You cannot split Burlington and not split South Burlington, because South Burlington hinges around Burlington. It cups the city of Burlington. So there's no way to decide to only split Burlington, really, that I could figure out, unless you drive it north into Colchester, which opens up a whole other set of challenges. So this is, I think this is intriguing. It's at least, you could pull it off if you wanted to. So it's about I want to say maybe 5 of Burlington's seats, or 6 of their House seats, the 2 from Winooski, and then the balance from South Burlington in that little arc shape. And then if you zoom out, Nick, and that it's not a clean line, but it crudely is Main Street. It's not a bad, and it mirrors the proposed House districts. So it's, at least from a election administration, it's not a humongous pain, says the guy that doesn't run the elections. Then in the southern, and so that's a 2-seater. Then in the southern part is the south end of Burlington. The southern part of South Burlington, Shelburne, Charlotte, Heinsberg, St. George, for a pretty decent 2-seater. Then as we've seen before, this 1-seater with Williston, and then the part of the MMU towns. which is, fairly compact. It's a little, what I like about this map is in the Burlington, South Burlington, and then South Burlington and South, you're not too domineering. I just always worry that these districts end up having one town that is guaranteed to have, half the votes or whatever. It's a bit akin to what Senator Brock is saying about Essex. And we're not going to be able to avoid it altogether. And this green district has a little piece of that because Williston is bigger, but it's not bigger than the combined total of the other towns. It's about half. So anyway, that's there is clearly Richmond, Bolton, Jericho clearly have sort of some of that rural affinity. There's community there that is straightforward, easy to justify. I think Tom Little would agree. And then the Northern District is, as you've seen, and just pull out a little bit for me, Nick. I will say to Senator Brock's point, one of the things that I've understood here is, and this Northern Starfish District takes a little bit of Colchester just to make the numbers work. It takes, if you're traveling along Route 15 out of Winooski, the 40th and Allen, and that is actually Colchester, and it takes that neighborhood. There's not a lot of people there, and not a lot of permanent residents there, but that does make the numbers work. But zoom back out for me, Nick. One of the realities is, even more, please, Nick, is we have some flexibility if you wanted to trade, between Alberg and Fairfax and shaving a little piece of Colchester here and there. There is some flexibility to move around without upsetting the rest of the apple cart all over the place. So that is a promising thing for me. The more I've played with it, the more I realize you do have some options that are not creating a big ripple effect. So anyway, main point of this one, I don't advocate for it, but it is another example where we're for the first time looking at a map that isn't a 2-seat single town district of Burlington. And I don't know what you all think. I can go either way. If I'm sort of thinking of it from a voter's perspective, it's very straightforward. I live in Burlington. These are my senators. If I think about it from a Montpelier perspective, I do worry. I mean, when I'm sitting in the ag committee, as much as witnesses like to make fun of me, there are a bunch of farms in Chittenden County, and that is a reality. And my job is to not just represent an urban core. That changes obviously if you become a senator from Burlington, and I don't know how to game that out, but it does give me some pause. This map doesn't change that radically, but it's not just Burlington. It would be, Burlington, Winooski, South Burlington. It's still pretty urban, but it is not the same monolith. You've got anyway. So as promised, there's one that isn't just a 2-seater from Burlington. It is possible. And I would say, Madam Chair, for me, my expectations would be that in the next 4 or 5 days, I now have easily 6 options for Chittenden County. I'd like to sit with the delegation from Chittenden County and kind of have them hash it out. I've shown them some of the maps informally. I promise you there's no consensus brewing any more than there is in this group. So I'll see what I can come back with. But we've largely been static in terms of the boundary lines. And so I'm hopeful that I could get that crew to some kind of consensus and then bring you back something. But obviously some of the peripheries like Fairfax, et cetera, will matter, but we do have some flexibility there.
So
when you consider Fairfax and Milton, you've got 15,000 voters just in those 2 towns alone. And there is concern that I've heard from both of them about being overwhelmed by the urban nature of Essex, and which they view very much as part of Burlington. So there are those concerns, and they're the same kinds of concerns that we hear in Lamoille County. again, in which the smaller rural towns feel overwhelmed when we combine them with these large urban neighbors. So that's just a concern, Chris, as you talk to folks about Chittenden County, that I wish you try to get some feel from your fellow legislators about those kinds of situations.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, so those two towns alone are about 15,000, as you say. When you add Westford, Underhill, that matches Essex. So and you know, in terms of, I mean, there's no perfect scene. I will say I'm completely uncomfortable voting for a district that is one relatively small town as a single seat senator. I mean, I just think that's kind of crazy that we would have. It's one thing in Burlington, at least it's a two-seater. You might argue it's somewhat unique, but Essex, you know, a suburban single seat district, I don't know. I just think that's very strange and makes me uncomfortable. The way to avoid that is not, as you're describing, exactly straightforward. But so there was a constituent that said, you know, what about the urban part of Essex being lumped with South Burlington and maybe Winooski, and then the more rural part with the more rural part of the county? I mean, I can look at that. The House districts sort of mirror some of that, so I'm willing to play with that. But I would just say I'm not going to support a map that has a single seat Essex only district. I think that's a real aberration from what we're doing.
And just to reinforce what Chris just said, I think it's very important. I mean, one of the differences between being a House member and a senator is, and I've come to really appreciate this having done both, is the regional aspect of representation, that you represent a diverse geography, you represent a diverse economies, you represent a wide range. And to have it more limited, I think the more diversity we can have, in some ways, it means that you could have somebody from Burlington who's also can be on ag. I hear exactly what you're saying, Chris. So I think that that's important. And in every one of our districts, we have a range of big towns. We each have some fairly good sized big towns that we represent and some fairly serious backcountry. So I kind of treasure that aspect of our regional diversity within our districts. And I think it's an important piece of being a senator, and not just having a mono, not that any town is a monoculture, but it's certainly a more condensed version of a mono something.
Well,
I want to make two comments here. I think that, first of all, I think that the politics in Essex are such that it's seems to me that even one senator there would be torn asunder by the politics within the town itself. So I don't think that would be. I maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that as a real problem. But the other thing, I think, picking up on what Allison just said, is that it is true that we're supposed to be regional and represent regions, but it's even more so true that we're supposed to represent the state. We should have a senator from Chittenden County does need to look out for Chittenden County, but not to the exclusion of looking out for the whole state. And I think that what we need to instill in ourselves and in all our other senators is that is our job, not to look at, my job isn't to do what's best for Windham County. I mean, it is to do what's best for Windham County, but not to the exclusion of the rest of the state. I think that we need to, the job of the House members is to be more parochial, but ours is not. And it's not even to be parochial around our region or our county. It's to, and I feel very strongly about that if we're really we need to represent our region, but we also need to be cognizant of the impact of everything on the entire state. And so if we represent big towns and little towns and backcountry and Democrats and Republicans, we're representing them all and the entire state. So I feel very strongly about that. But and
Absolutely.
So-
I think it's well said.
Chris had a comment, I think.
No, I was just going to say that the political divide within Essex it would be quite rude. They have spent the last 20 years trying to figure out how to be together and have finally decided not to be together.
Right.
You know, and it's real contentious out there.
It is.
So.
But Chris, you could say the same thing about Rutland County. Rutland Town and Rutland City don't particularly get along well, and yet the senators there represent both of them.
Well, there have been, Senator Collmore, there have been probably a half dozen votes to merge, to study how to merge, to figure out a unified district, municipal officials, and then finally, none of that is quite panned out. And this was from forces that wanted to unify because they have a lot of duplication of services and it's real clunky. And now they've had a vote too. So sure, there's rivalries and such all over, but this has been an active political debate that's left nerves frayed since before I started in the House. And I had the pleasure of serving with a person from rural Essex and a person from the downtown in my committee.
Right.
And I stepped into it one day and I got an education. So I just think you know, they've been voting on this and it's been really tough. And the last vote was fine. We're going to dissolve and set up our own municipality and you know, and that's very fresh. We're about to see that charter change. And so I think we just have to be cognizant of that as we make these decisions.
Understood.
So I just want to make one more comment, and that is about serving our constituents. And I'm thinking now about Stowe and about Washington County people having to go to Stowe to things. And when we in Windham County, and it's not the same at all, I understand, but Wilmington and Dover have, for example, the same economic development office, the same Chamber of Commerce. Wilmington, Dover really is kind of a unit, and yet they're in two different senatorial districts. And so when there's something going on in Wilmington, we go, even though they're not in our senatorial district. So I guess I am sorry that people from Washington would have to go to Stowe, but I don't know. I just anyway. Okay.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think if one of the next steps is to have the Chittenden County delegation take a peek at this mess, I would suggest that the Lamoille, Washington delegations meet, because that might make a good amount of sense for them to talk together. And Andy, maybe I don't understand, maybe you already have, but it strikes me that this is the time for that before we make any further assumptions on this, because I think that is, as Chris and Andy said, I mean, this Stowe is really a key piece here. And perhaps that's a good next step.
Well, yeah, I would say that they can meet whenever they want,
Andy,
just as the Chittenden delegation can meet. I don't think we can tell them that they should meet. That's up to them.
I'm not saying that, Madam Chair. I'm just suggesting that there be parallel actions here. Andy's hand
Yeah.
is, I see.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. Andy?
First of all, I wanted to clear the record. I wasn't trying to say that the senators from Washington County don't want to go to Stowe or that it would be a problem. I love Stowe. I go there all the time. I just thought, from my perspective, to Senator Pearson's point, we're all coming at this from our own perspective. I took the time to work with Nick to make a map that I thought worked. I'm not saying Stowe can't be in another district. I'm not saying Eden can't go somewhere, Cambridge could go somewhere. I was just presenting this as what I thought was a good option. I could vote for a map with Stowe in Washington County. I just would want to see what the full map is and what are we doing in other places. I just didn't want to be people misunderstand what I was trying to say about having that other economic focus.
Yeah, no, I think we understood that, Andy, and I didn't mean to imply that you didn't want to go to Stowe. I didn't. If it sounded like that, I'm sorry. That isn't what I meant.
So, Andy, would it make some sense to meet with Richie with your delegation?
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be great before we meet again.
Okay, is this a map that can be posted and so
certainly
fine with me.
okay, all right.
I think one of the other things that I'm not sure if this Burlington-Chittenden County thing is what Pearson is recommending, or what just one of the other options similar to the Stowe issue or some of the other things. So is it a similar thing where Chittenden County delegation is going to get together, or?
Yes, that's what he had suggested. I would suggest before we share this,
I don't see why you'd want to post this map without having them meet, having Washington Lamoille meet. And I think Randy and I and Brian ought to be meeting, because you guys have carved up our districts to be a lot different.
Bobby, nobody has carved up your district any more than any other district. We probably have 10 or 15 different maps, and they are coming from different places. But I don't think, if you're wedded to one single map and that's where you're going to stick, then I think we're in trouble. That we have to be looking at all the maps and all the options. And I don't think that we should become have a lot of ownership on the maps. We're 7 people here that are going to have to draw a map that is going to hopefully get a vote from 7 people and then from 30 people. And then that's going to satisfy 620,000 people, or as many of those as we can. So I don't think that we should have a lot of ownership on the maps. Different people are putting forth.
We'd better have it so that we all have some ownership of the final map. And you're not going to get that if you keep letting one group chop up another group. And
Bobby, you met with a couple people and did a map. Okay, that was a map. Then a few other people got together and did a different version of a map. It isn't chopping up the map that you did. It's doing a different map. Nobody is chopping up anybody's map. What we're doing is we're looking, whoops, did we just lose? It said, okay.
No,
so and we do have to all have ownership in the final map. But what I'm saying is, if you are stuck on the original map that you did and you're not willing to move off that, then we are in deep trouble, because you could be saying that, and then the original map that I believe that Chris and Andy came up with an original map about 2 weeks ago, And if they're stuck on that original map and don't want anybody messing with their map, we're not going to get any place unless we're willing to start looking at at getting to a final map. We can't.
Well, the only thing I have a concern over, this total discussion has been over one town. One town. This whole discussion has been in regards to one community. And I think that is pretty bad when there's 270 odd of us throughout the state. And this whole discussion has been caused by one community.
No, I think that one of the problems here is that if that moving or not moving Stowe makes a huge impact on the rest of the whole from Washington up on everybody. So I think that we have to make some decisions about that, because however we treat Stowe is going to have a huge impact on what else happens in the state. And it's the same thing about Essex or Auburn. I mean, I think that is important for us to decide.
Well, Stowe isn't going to have the impact on the rest of the state. It's the northern part of the state. You guys down south aren't going to be touched in any single way.
That's exactly what I said. From Washington up, whatever we do with Stowe is going to have an impact on. It's not going to make any difference in Windham County. I've already given up on getting Wilmington and Londonderry back. They're gone. We're we just need to make sure that we're not so wedded to a single map that we aren't willing to listen to other proposals. Chris?
Well, I guess Center Star, the thing is that we looked at this map and said, what has Bobby identified as priorities? Linden was a big one. So it's not quite offensive, but we spent a lot of energy trying to figure out what has been a clearly stated priorities from you, and try to put that in here. So nobody's trying to screw you over. There's easy ways to do that, and that's not this map. The thing about Stowe is it's smack dab. It's a big town, and it's smack dab in the middle of the whole problem region that is making the whole thing difficult. And so, as we've looked, if you move Stowe one way, it's a radically different map than if you move it a different way. And that's all. It's not that we all are aiming at you and your district, and it's not all that we care deeply about Stowe. It's that a single town of 5,000 people in the middle of the edge of a single seat district has major ripple effects. And, moving Wolcott does not have major ripple effects. So I just want to say, I feel somewhat impugned by our exercise. It's not like Jeanette said, go get us a map that Bobby's going to find offensive. It's just that we're all trying to solve this problem. And Andy and I took some time to see if we could come up with a map that kept Stowe in Lamoille. And then we said, boy, that does a lot of changes to EO. Well, let's make sure Linden is not an EO, because that's been a clearly articulated corridor down into Caledonia County by Senator Starr. Let's see if we can't make it a straightforward line. As you see, it's not herky-jerky. It's kind of neat as it intersects there with the three counties in Washington and Caledonia. So there was great care taken. I'm regret if you feel targeted, but that was not the impetus. I would just back up Senator White on that, and
that isn't the case at all. You didn't even fool much with my district other than Richford and Montgomery. But if you take 5,000 people from the southern part of Lamoille and move it in with the 60,000 odd person district into a 3-member Senate district, it doesn't have the effect that it does on a single member Senate district. And
That's exactly what we're saying.
yeah, so you move Stowe south and it frees up a whole handful of issues.
Well, that is the question. That's why we wanted to get people's input on how they felt about Stowe. And what I have is that Bobby and Brian and Randy and probably myself don't care where Stowe is. I mean, I am not wedded to being in Lamoille or in Washington. And Allison and Andy feel pretty strongly that it should stay in Lamoille. So that's what we were trying to figure out today, is where we are on that, because moving Stowe one way or the other is going to have a huge impact on what the rest of the area up there does. So that was, and I don't know if that accurately reflects where people's thoughts were. Randy, are you trying to say something?
No, I understand that some of Bobby's feelings on this. We created a map that has minimum deviations, that has nothing greater than 6%, that doesn't cross any town lines other than Burlington, and that keeps the county lines as close as possible to where they ought to be. And it was those kinds of principles that we followed in getting to where we got. I'm certainly willing to look at alternatives, and I applaud Chris for producing some additional alternatives that we can look at. But I think in looking at alternatives, just as you look at our alternatives, we look at your alternatives, and you can look at the pluses, but you can also look at the minuses. And I think that's one of the things that we perhaps ought to list as what are the pluses of these alternatives and what are the minuses, and what are the things that we're giving up, and what are the things, particularly in terms of principles, that we're perhaps compromised. And that might be a good exercise to do when we come back to revisit.
I think that's a great idea. What I would like to do then, I think, is take what we think of as maybe the three most supported maps. And if you let's see what those are. The one, Randy, that you did at the very beginning, what's the label on that one?
Goodness, Nick, you probably know that better than I do.
Nick, do you know?
That I don't have that information at the moment, but I could go back into the onto the server and find that file.
Okay, so if you would send us that label, and do we want to do this label and maybe one other, and then look at the pros and cons of each of those. I think that's a great idea, Randy, and to just figure out where are the issues. I think there was one other map that was done by before this one, that was Chris. I think you worked on another map before this one that was a little bit different. It had Alberg back in Franklin, I think, and Linden in Caledonia, in Essex, Orleans. And so are those the three maps that, does that make any sense? Everybody else, does that make any sense to do it that way, and to just kind of individually make our list of what the pros and cons of each of those maps are, and then see where
and the pros and cons, there are some key decisions that are made in this map, just as there were key decisions made in our map, and kind of focusing on what those key decisions and the ripple effect of pro and con. I mean, that's the way I look at it, as opposed to looking at the detail of the map itself. I think it's also going to be worthwhile for Bobby, myself, Brian, and inviting a couple of others to look over our shoulders so as we don't get into quorum issues. Again, to get together with Nick one more time and try to take the best of what we had in our map and the best, and I see some things in Chris's map that I like, particularly in terms of the way he deals with some things in Chittenden County. And I think we can perhaps try to put some of those together. We also have the benefit of talking with constituents. And, you know, here, those of us who are in the northern part of the state have constituents that we could talk with directly, as opposed to, you know, getting rumors or unsolicited mail. And, you know, say, for example, on the 2-member district that includes Essex and Milton, I've gotten a fair amount of feedback, and perhaps we can use that in our next discussion about mapping to try to deal with some of that, as well as perhaps to incorporate some of the good things that we see out of Chris's map and see where we come up. And then we're going to meet again, and who knows when, though. At this point.
That could be a song, maybe.
Who knows?
I
When?
see Tom
Yeah,
has his hand up.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I have to go. I'm being called to the principal's office. And I sadly need to go, but I await edification by all of you as our next steps.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good luck.
I think, Randy,
Wait, Bobby. Tom had a comment, and then I think it's probably getting close to 9.
Yeah, it is, because I've got a 9 o'clock appearance.
Yeah,
in the house.
I do too.
I think the Brock Star map is dated February 16.
It's 18.
it's either the 16th or 18th.
I think it's the 16th, Bobby, because it keeps Franklin County more intact.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so when shall we meet again next?
That's a good question.
I think that Friday is going to be probably, I mean, we can keep the schedule and we can keep it on our list and just see how the floor goes, but I doubt we're going to be able to do it.
Is there any possibility of, and I'll have to ask Randy too, we normally have a caucus Friday morning, but I would forego that if possible, if we could get together again at 7:30 Friday morning.
That's up to you. Yeah, if you can do that, that's.
Randy, are you okay with that?
I'm probably okay with that, but I've got to just see what else that we've got on the agenda for that. So later today, I'll be able to confirm that.
I mean, It might be the only time the rest of this week when we can, unless people want to get together on the weekend, and I'm fine with that too.
Well, I have an hour.
Yeah.
I have an hour and a half at 10 o'clock on Thursday night.
I'm there.
Okay.
We've got to meet with Richie too. So, you know, our little groups have got to meet in between. So.
Yep. Okay.
And as do we.
Let's count. Let's for now, unless we hear otherwise, let's try for 7:30 Friday morning. If Nick or Mike, either one can do that.
Certainly can.
Okay.
Okay.
And sorry to, I hope you get overtime pay for this.
I do. Don't worry.
Good. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.